4 is here and you need to set your lineup. And you're starting to tinker with, do I start this wide receiver or do I start this wide receiver? Well, this video will help you because these are the 10 wide receivers you have to start and sit for week 4. We are beginning with the rookie Romeo Dobbs in Green Bay, who this week is a must start because he's a top 20 wide receiver in my rankings and projections. And he had his breakout game, if you will, last week when he catches 100% of his targets, all 8 of them, 73 yards and a touchdown. And he also earned 2 other targets that were called back by penalty. So 10 targets from Rodgers in this one, but here's the big thing. He did it against the Bucs secondary, and their entire defense is great, but let's take a look at how good the secondary is. So far this season, the Bucs ranked 2nd overall. This is including playing Romeo Dobbs last week, and he was still able to break through in coverage. And this is something they've been doing for years now, is being strong in that secondary, especially their safeties. Now, this past week, we saw a little bit of a passing of the torch, if you will. Romeo Dobbs, he ended up leading the team in routes. He stayed out there over Allen Lazard for 1 wide receiver sets, and this ended up leading to him seeing 8, technically 10 targets if you count those 2 passes that were called back for penalty, compared to Allen Lazard's 6, and he was seeing some downfield usage as well. And his toughest matchup of the season is now behind him in the Bucs, which he conquered, and he has a really good one this week. And that's because he faces the New England Patriots, who ranked 28th in coverage so far this year. They have not been good. They lost J.C. Jackson in this offseason in free agency and a bunch of other pieces. It's nowhere near the same secondary that we're used to from a couple years back. And now the way this Packers offense has been set up so far, it's just quick passes, but Dobbs has all that downfield upside. Because in college, that's exactly what he was doing. 17.3 yards per reception is elite. 14 yards per reception is well above average his final 2 years in college. He's earning targets. They're going to start to come downfield, which is where those 100-yard games will come from. So start him with confidence, but then sit this next guy. And that would be the Washington Commanders wide receiver, Terry McLaurin. And yes, this may sound crazy, but he's a sit this week, and let's break it down. Based on his usage, McLaurin currently ranks 50th in expected fantasy points so far to this part of the season, which is predictive of what the future success is going to be, which ranks around guys like Devontae Parker, Traquan Smith, and his teammate Jahan Dotson. So if you're thinking about starting those guys, then maybe you want to start McLaurin depending on your league size, but odds are you're not starting Traquan Smith this week. And McLaurin is obviously a great receiver, but here's the issue with his usage. He's seeing downfield targets, which normally is fantastic. 7 deep targets ranks 2nd in the NFL. This is targets of 20+ yards, but there is a major concern. And that major concern is his quarterback, who ranks below average in deep ball percentage, and when he's pressured, ranks 30th this year, and they're allowing a lot of pressure, and you saw that last week when the Eagles sacked Carson Wentz 9 times. This is the concern. It's that Terry McLaurin is seeing the downfield usage, but primarily just the downfield usage because Curtis Samuel is operating on all the underneath easy catches, your catch and run yards after the catch, whereas right now 19.6 yards per reception is an elite number, but it's more so like an MVS style player. And MVS, the former Packer and now the Chiefs receiver, he's kind of a boom bust player, and that's what McLaurin is turning into, except he doesn't have the most consistent quarterback in Wentz. And his divisional matchup this week is sneaky not good for his role. You see, he'll face the Dallas Cowboys, who have only allowed 435 yards through 3 games to all receivers they've faced, and they've only allowed 2 catches to be completed of 20+ yards, which is where all of McLaurin's usage is coming from right now. So consider sitting McLaurin and starting this next guy over him. And that's Bills wide receiver Gabe Davis, who finds himself in an elite matchup versus the Ravens. As you can see from StatMuse, the Ravens have allowed the most passing yards this season with almost 1,100. They've allowed actually right now 29% more than any other team. The next closest team, the Dolphins, it's pretty dang crazy. The Dolphins have allowed over 150 less yards than the Ravens. That's how much this banged up secondary has just been leaking yards to the passing game and 2 wide receivers. And now Gabe Davis played through injury in week 3, and that's why he didn't produce. And on the early injury report this week, like last week, he has been limited with this ankle injury. We'll have to track this. Maybe if he can get a full participation, and then we feel really good about his overall status. But here's the issue with what happened last week. It was reported that Davis wasn't supposed to play anywhere near as much as he did. But the reason that he played 87 snaps and led the team with 70 routes is because this guy at the bottom of the screen, the former Green Bay Packer, Jake Kumerow, was expected to play a lot more in this one because Davis was dealing with injury. But Kumerow ended up getting hurt, so Davis was forced into the outside role, a spot where Isaiah McKenzie and Jamison Crowder don't play as well as he does. And now, even banged up, Davis was able to earn 6 targets. It was only a 10% target rate, so not the greatest, but here's what he's done as a starter in his career. If we look at all the games where he's basically played starter snaps, it's 13. He's averaged 12.8 fantasy points, which is definitely starter worthy in most of your fantasy leagues, and at the very least a flex spot. And he's averaged nearly 7 targets per game, and he's only going to get better as he has more experience with Josh Allen in this offense. He's somebody that I'm playing assuming that he's going to be healthier this week. And believe it or not, you should start this next Giants wide receiver, and that would be Richie James, who profiles out as of right now to be the Giants' #1 wide receiver. And that's because Sterling Shepard is done for the season with an ACL injury, sadly, and then you have guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, the rookie, who will probably miss a couple of more weeks, and Kadarius Toney continues to deal with injury. He did not practice to open up the week this week. If these guys all miss again, so really it comes down to Toney here, Richie James is going to be the #1 because there's only other competition position is David Sills, who's mainly like a preseason player, and then Kenny Golladay. Galladay's usage has been weird. Week 2, he only plays 2 snaps, runs 2 routes. Last week, even when they're down a bunch of bodies, Sterling Shepard gets hurt. They don't have Kadarius Toney or Ronald Robinson. Galladay's still only playing 32% of the snaps, so still operating as a backup. He'll probably have to see more snaps now, but they don't want to use this guy, which says a lot about how he's probably handling himself because he was paid a lot of money. They're incentivized to use him. Now, so far in the season, Richie James has developed a nice connection with Daniel Jones. He's averaged at least 5 targets in each of these games, and this last one was the big one. He went from running only 21 routes a game to now running 38 routes, and this number is going to hold sticky no matter what this week because of the Sterling Shepard injury. So you're going to want to start him. He's a top 30 ranked wide receiver, actually top 25 in my rankings right now, and he also has a good matchup because he'll face the Bears secondary that ranked 23rd right now in coverage, and they're allowing wide receivers to put up points at a top 10 rate per route. This is very good for Richie James. So consider him, especially in your flex, and then sit this AFC wide receiver. And that would be Rashad Bateman. Yes, Rashad Bateman, who is probably like a 5th or a 6th round pick for you. I'm considering him a sit this week because he currently ranks 61st in expected fantasy points to this point in the season, meaning that based on the usage he's seeing, he's putting up on average the 61st performance over these first 3 weeks and moving forward if the usage doesn't change. This is in the same range as his teammate Devin Duvernay, who's basically surviving on touchdowns, and Ashton Dulin. But the problem for Rashad Bateman is he's not surviving on touchdowns and he's not getting that usage. Now let's break down this usage so you can actually see how concerning it is. So to start, he's only averaging 5.3 targets per game, and now with J.K. Dobbins back, this team is likely to run the ball a little bit more. Lamar is running the ball a ton, and you have Mark Andrews operating as the clear #1 receiver. So this is a concern. I don't know how this is going to come up all that much. And the bigger concern, unlike Devin Duvernay, who has a couple of touchdowns this year and a couple of red zone targets, there's no red zone usage so far. It's a small sample of 3 games. I expect him to see some red zone targets, but you would have liked to see them prioritize him so far to this point there. They haven't. And the bigger issue is he's seen as the wide receiver 1 here, but this is clearly Mark Andrews' role. Because if you combine the tight ends and the wide receivers' fantasy points so far this season, Mark Andrews is a top 10 player, even including all of the wide receivers. He's by far the #1 receiver here in what seems to be more of a run-first offense. And he's playing his best role he ever has. He doesn't leave the field. He's running around on 97% of Lamar Jackson's dropbacks. In the past, this number was like 80%, which would mean that Bateman could see more usage as the wide receiver 1 on the field. Not happening this year. And Bateman himself is actually the one coming off the field more and more this season, which is pretty concerning. Bateman has only ran a route on 80% of Lamar Jackson's dropbacks, which ranks 60th amongst all receivers. So how can you be a starting #1 receiver if that's your usage, and it's only leading to 23 routes run per game? It's difficult to have these massive performances unless you're doing it on 5 targets like he did week 2, which is not sustainable and not going to be consistent when you're only running 70 routes on the year. That's a concern. And then you throw on to the fact that his week 4 matchup against the Buffalo Bills isn't good because the Bills have been playing banged up. They have lost guys for the season that are important to their secondary, their safeties, right? Their elite safeties have been banged up, and they still rank top 8 in coverage. That's how good this scheme is. And they allow the 7th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position, allowing just 430 yards through the first 3 games total. So this all boils down to sitting Bateman, and then honestly, you might want to consider starting this next guy. And he's been an absolute letdown, but it's DJ Moore, and it's now or never for him. And it has nothing to do with his skill set as to why he's a letdown. It has everything to do with, 1, his coaching staff. They rank 31st in passing offense after ranking 32nd in passing offense with a different quarterback last year. This starts to come and point the finger from the quarterback situation in Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield to the coaching staff and what their schemes are right now. And then yes, we can't let Baker Mayfield off the hook completely here because he hasn't been good either. Baker currently ranks 30th in quarterback efficiency and 31st in true completion percentage. I mean, this is a concern. He's operating as a bottom 3 quarterback in the NFL right now. But let's be fair here. The guy is under pressure constantly. This offensive line is banged up and it was supposed to be better. They spent a top 10 pick on an offensive lineman. They ended up investing this offseason in the offensive line, and it's still not good. 25th in protection rate for Baker. So when you don't have time to throw, it's going to be an issue, but Baker seems panicked in the pocket. So all this is concerning. So why is this the week now that maybe DJ Moore and everything else gets back on track? Well, it's because he's facing the Arizona Cardinals, who by far rank dead last in coverage and secondary play, which means it's going to be even easier for DJ Moore to get open here. And DJ Moore has had no issues getting open this season. He's still top 15 in the NFL in target separation versus man coverage, meaning that he's getting open and his quarterback's just not getting him the ball. More specifically, and this is absolutely crazy, DJ Moore, 50% of his targets this year, 9 of his 18 targets have been not catchable, which ranks 92nd amongst all wide receivers. And that's really concerning when you consider that he's top 15 at getting open. So it's not like the quarterback and Baker is trying to fit this into tight spaces. No, he's actually open out there. So if there was ever a week to start DJ Moore and then try and sell him high right after this week, it's right now. And then believe it or not, you're going to want to sit Garrett Wilson, and I will fully admit he has been fantastic. 24 targets over the last 2 weeks for the rookie, 6 red zone targets over that time. He has been elite. So much so that according to expected fantasy points, the only wide receivers that have been expected to score more points based on their usage and how good they've been is Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, and Cooper Kupp. Oh yeah, all first-round fantasy picks basically, and then Garrett Wilson. So why in the world would you consider sitting him this week, Sal? Well, there's a couple of issues here. First off, that 12 target pace over the last 2 weeks is not going to sustain. The Jets are are throwing 52 times per game, which would be an NFL record, and it's 48% more right now than the NFL average. So this isn't going to sustain. This is going to drop basically by like 12 pass attempts a game. And now it's trending that Zach Wilson might return this week, which is a big question mark with how he'll play with Garrett Wilson after he had a connection with Elijah Moore last year. And now there's a lot of other pieces here for this scheme in Zach Wilson. So less passing, a new quarterback, and there's actually a third issue. He's going to have his toughest matchup yet, because he's going to face the Steelers, who their secondary is basically a top 10 unit to this point of the season. More specifically, when he's in the slot, which has been most of his usage so far this year, maybe that'll change throughout the season, but he'll see Cam Sutton, who Cam Sutton has been the Steelers' best cornerback so far. And he's in the top third of the league in coverage right now, 34th out of 109 cornerbacks according to Pro Football Focus, which is very good. I mean, this is on pace to be a top 20 cornerback by the end of the season. And Sutton is allowing less than 50 yards per game in coverage, which is not great for Wilson. So there's a lot of moving factors here which make me want to sit Wilson and then start the Seattle receiver. That would be Tyler Lockett, who has a fantastic matchup, the complete opposite of the rookies matchup in Garrett Wilson. Lockett is going to be facing the Detroit Lions, that their secondary has been atrocious for years now, but they rank 30th again this year through 3 weeks. And based on where Lockett plays in the slot, he'll get to avoid their #1 cornerback in Jeffrey Okudah. And instead, he'll see Mike Hughes, who, as you can see right here, according to Pro Football Focus, ranks 95th out of 103, bottom 10 in cornerback coverage this year. And Tyler Lockett, when you factor in his matchup against the other cornerbacks that he'll see in this game, it's not likely to be Okudah. That will be on DK Metcalf. Okudah's a bigger cornerback, has to guard the bigger receiver in Metcalf. But Lockett right now has the 6th best overall matchup on the weekend. It's actually better than the matchup of Stephon Diggs. It's right around the matchup of Devontae Adams. This is a really good spot for Lockett. He's a must start. And then it's also worth mentioning that he's getting open still, and he's running routes, 30 plus routes a week. The Seattle Seahawks actually ran 71 plays last week, by far the most that they've ran in basically 2 years, which led to 11 targets. He's now seen 22 targets the last 2 weeks. Continue to start him. So you want to grab him and put him in your lineup, and you also want to grab this beautiful material. And that would be my weekly cheat sheet, which comes with player rankings and projections, waiver wire tiers, player notes for every single fantasy relevant player, matchup notes, everything you need to know basically to win your matchup each week. And you can get this by clicking the link in the description and following the 2 simple steps. It's a one-time payment of $10. And here's the big thing. See what's on the screen right now? If you don't win your league, I'll be completely fine, 100% refunding you if you would like that $10. So this is risk-free. You don't win your league, you could use the material. You don't win, I'll send you the $10 back. You just reach out to me when that happens. So if you want to join literally the thousands of people using this material to win their leagues each and every week, well, click the link in the description to learn more. And then make sure you consider benching Allen Robinson this week, because he has a really difficult matchup against the #1 secondary in the NFL right now in the San Francisco 49ers, who have currently allowed the 2nd fewest receptions on the season and the 2nd fewest receiving yards. Just 29 receptions to wide receivers over 3 games. And if anybody's going to get those receptions in this one, it's probably Cooper Kupp. But that's not all. The real concern here is what Robinson is doing against man coverage, because he currently ranks 70th at separation. This was his saving grace last year coming into this year. He was still getting open versus man coverage. Justin Fields just wasn't hitting him. But right now, he's not getting open anywhere near it against man coverage. And this is leading to him seeing his career low, a 13% target rate, which means he's getting a target on just 13% of his routes. As you can see, it ranks outside the top 90 receivers. This is a major issue. So you want to sit Robinson, but then start this AFC stud. And that's Mike Williams, who I'm getting a lot of questions about, very similar to week 1. And then week 2, he came out and he put up 20 plus points in the first half. Let's see what he did in week 3. Week 3 only puts up 8.5 points, and he somewhat saves the day on his 6 targets. He caught 1 of them for a 15-yard touchdown, and now it's leading some people to panic about should they trade him. If you're going to trade him, you trade him after a big week, not after he has a bad week. You want to get as much value out of him and any trade player as possible. And look, everything right now looks great for Mike Williams. He actually played his most snaps in that last game. He's running 40 plus routes a week. He's earning targets still, including red zone targets. So everything is going to click for him. The problem is the injuries on his team. Justin Herbert is obviously dealing with injury. He did not look great in that last game. Made a nice throw, but didn't look great. And now they lost Rashawn Slater, probably their 2 most important pieces on offense. But I'm still a believer in Big Mike. If you want to sell high on him, do that after this week, because he'll see a lot of the rookie Derek Stingley Jr., who ranks 92nd out of 103 cornerbacks according to PFF, which is bottom 10 in the NFL. And Mike Williams is also going to have a major advantage over the other cornerbacks, Desmond King when he's in the slot and Steven Nelson on the outside, because Mike Williams is about 6'4", 6'5", so he'll have about 4 to 5 inches on all the other cornerbacks, and he's 220 pounds. And as you can see right here, the other cornerbacks on this team, the biggest one is Desmond King in the slot, where Mike Williams won't be all that much. He only weighs 200 pounds, so he's going to have like a 20 to 30 pound advantage on all these dudes. So make sure you're starting Mike Williams this week, and also make sure you understand the running backs you need to play, especially when it compares to these wide receivers. You want to make sure you're getting the best running backs in your lineup. This video right here is going to explain the 10 running backs you need to start and sit before week 4 begins. And if you're not already, if you're one of the 60% of people who aren't subscribed, hit the subscribe button.